Okay, so today we are actually looking at two books because they are both by the same author and I have similar things to say about both of them. So the first is Searching for Bobby Orr, and the second is Gretzky's Tears, and they are both by Stephen Brunt. And they are both exceptional. I really recommend either one. I think if I had to pick one, I would say Searching for Bobby Orr gives you a really, really interesting historical look at all of the background, which is something that I personally am very interested in. I think sports history is really fascinating, and it's actually, Searching for Bobby Orr is really interesting. I think you learn a lot about hockey history and not a lot about Bobby Orr. I mean, you learn a lot of facts, but I feel like you don't get a lot of like a feel for who he is at all as a person. This was an unofficial biography. Bobby Orr did not speak or give any interviews, although I do think he gave permission for Brunt to talk to people in his life, but I'm not fully sure about that. It's interesting. It's interesting that you get a lot of facts and biography about Bobby Orr without really learning much about Bobby Orr. But you do get a lot of really good context for where Bobby Orr came into the NHL and what was going on and what was happening. So that is really interesting, and I really highly recommend it. Gretzky's Tears is another one of those. This book doesn't focus on Gretzky. It's not meant to be a biography the way that Searching for Bobby Orr is. It's really looking at kind of the day that Gretzky was traded as a huge momentous occasion in hockey history, which it was undeniably. In a very, very real way, if Gretzky had not been traded, we would not have hockey in a lot of the markets we have it in right now. I know that the King, he was traded to the Kings. They were franchised before he got there, but they were nothing. I mean, they were like a blip on the radar. But this book does a really, really interesting job of looking at the way that players can become very entrenched in the league and the fate of the league. I know that in a few videos ago, I talked about the Kid and Sidney Crosby and how he was sort of, the success of the league was kind of put on him as his job, and that is really fucked up, but it is the way sports works. And Gretzky, I think, is the case study for that. Crosby certainly has affected the league, but there's never going to be another Gretzky. There just isn't. It's not going to happen. So this is really fascinating and really interesting that way. It looks at, you get a look at sort of more modern hockey. I mean, obviously the Gretzky era was different than the current era, but this is certainly more current than the stuff that you're getting in Searching for Bobby Orr. So it's a toss-up. They're both really interesting for context. I think if you are not a big history person, then A, you must hate me, and B, this is probably the book you want to go with. It does have a lot more kind of far-reaching consequences, which is really cool. And it's very kind to Janet Gretzky, and not all history books, particularly when discussing the trade, are kind to Janet Gretzky. So this is so I'm going to read you actually two short passages from Gretzky's Tears, because one of them I just like, and one of them I think is a bit more demonstrative of what you can expect in the book, and I don't want to mislead you. But this is just really touching, and I think kind of sums up the way that everyone who likes hockey feels about Wayne Gretzky, which is this really weird intensity. So all I wanted to do was please Wayne Gretzky. In the first game, there was a 2-on-1, and I wanted to hold the puck and give him the perfect play. It didn't work. He came back to the bench after, and he just says nonchalantly, "Lukey, give it to me and I'll give it back to you." From that day on, for the next month or 2 months, every time I got the puck, I just literally threw it to him. I was so nervous. That's how much I wanted to impress him. It got to a point where I almost literally couldn't play with him because I just wanted everything to be perfect. So this is a little bit more demonstrative of what you can actually expect from the book, which is kind of a look at where hockey was going and why this trade was such a big deal. The National Hockey League, by contrast, was a largely American-based entertainment business with an American president and a mostly American team owners who called the shots according to their needs. Forget about playing the nostalgia card. It had always been thus. 2/3 of the original 6 were based in the United States, and when the league embarked on its first great expansion, adding 6 franchises all at once, not a single one was located north of the great unguarded border. The NHL would take the pure products of Canadian hockey culture, compensate them for their talents, make them stars, but the minute they cashed that first check, really, the minute they signed over their allegiance to an NHL team as a teenager, they straddled the line between culture and commerce, between becoming a product. When the line between hockey and hockey business was blurred, most often intentionally by money guys trying to sucker some poor Canadian into following his heart instead of his head, it was time to start feeling for your wallet. Gordie Howe, God love him, didn't give up a raise in favor of a new hockey jacket because he was stupid. He did it because in that moment, in his naivete, he honestly believed that those extra dollars might be the difference between the success or failure of the Detroit Red Wings. If the Wings started losing money, hockey would be in trouble, and if hockey was in trouble, he might well end up back on the farm in Floral, Saskatchewan, working all day in the summer and freezing his behind off in the winter. Surely the game that had given him this life was worth protecting, even if it meant foregoing the extra dollars that the best player in hockey had to know he deserved. So if those two things don't make you want to pick up this book, then I don't know what will.